To give some background to the documentary, obviously I played over in Bristol for 3 years and was lucky enough to play with a lot of Samoan internationals while I was there, and I got to see firsthand the difficulties they had with pairing up, playing for their club and trying to play internationally. Just to explain to people out there, you've guys who, for example, go to play in a World Cup, and if you were playing for Ireland or England in the World Cup, you'd have a minimum of 4 weeks after the competition ended. The Samoan guys might have had 1 week, and because they're deemed to be a tier 2 nation, they'd be straight back in. And then on top of that, then you've issues with guys getting money back for flights, not getting match fees. And, obviously I was coming from the Irish setup, which is brilliant. Everyone's kind of looked after. And I couldn't believe that, a team that on our day could beat us has to deal with these kind of external factors.
Yeah, there's lots of challenges playing, not just for the Pacific Islands, but I guess for tier 2 and 3 nations. I think that that run into tests that you mentioned, only having at times 3 or 4 days to come together and try and get your combinations, good enough to test some of the bigger nations who might have had 3 or 4 2-week camps, is very difficult. And it's not, the player pools there. We know how many talented Pacific Island players there are around the world for us to pick. But you can be bringing the best team, of players together, and if you haven't got time and resources to put into developing that, and also, the team culture, it's going to be difficult to get those results. So, that's probably one of the issues. There's so many issues affecting Pacific Island rugby, particularly due to our lack of resources. And a club like Bristol, you would have seen, as you said, you would have seen those players struggling to at times to go away and get that cooperation between the club and the Pacific Island unions, and that's with Pat Lam as your coach, and he's probably a lot more sympathetic to a lot of the clubs and coaches that are out there. God forbid when I was playing, I'd ever turn back from playing for Samoa injured. And that's at the very top, the very pinnacle of the game. You go down a couple of levels where we're having to draw a lot of our players from the the second division of France, for instance. It gets even harder and harder to have those conversations to get clubs to release you when you know that you're basically going to have to forfeit your month's salary while you're away. So if it's difficult for the players at the top at Bristol, it's even more so for the case for those guys that are below the top divisions.
Dan, I think one of the main issues that I noticed in the documentary was the issue with player retention and Islanders not playing with their native islands. And I think it opened up my eyes to both sides of the argument, the reasons why they're not playing because the funding isn't there, and that I saw the poverty. And, in the documentary, you see the need for the players to go abroad and to make the big money so that they can send home. So it is, the players are in a very difficult situation.
Yeah, they are, and first it's probably worth mentioning we don't actually want that situation can't change where players our Pacific Island players are able to represent other nations, because they do that very proudly. Even in Ireland, there with guys like Bandiaki and Sene Naupu in the women's game represent. They consider themselves Irish Pacific Islanders. And that's that's reflective of the world, society today. And unfortunately, the eligibility laws are one of those areas that we really need rugby to look at, because those they don't currently probably reflect the reality of not just society but economic migration, which we spoke a bit about off camera. And the fact that guys are in a lot of cases going across and qualifying for these nations, to look after people and, look after their families, look after their villages, and extreme examples. And, we'd like to, and those are actually really valuable things that should be celebrated. It's a great honour for those players to be able to do that. But it's just a shame that it comes at the detriment sometimes, particularly at, once they don't, they're no longer wanted by those tier one nations, that they can't come back and give back to the Pacific Islands if they've still got something to give.
Yeah, just on how reliant World Rugby is on the Pacific Island players. Like for me personally, coming through the Leinster system, I had Easton Nasiwa there who mentored me and was probably the most influential player I've had throughout my career. He taught me so much, both on the field and off the field, and even in my time in Bristol, like learning off guys like Tusi Pisi. One of the things I thought of, like in Ireland, if you break through and you play professionally for Ireland, your mini rugby team will get rewarded. Will get a financial reward for the time that they've invested in you, getting it up to that level. Even though it might only be up to the age of 10, 11 or 12, they'll still get rewarded when you get your first international cap. I wonder, is something that can be brought in that within a contract, even if it's something as small as 1% of the contract, has to go back to the native, or to the country where that player originated from, like to see how far that money could potentially go in the islands. Like, do you see that as a potential route, or is it something that you've looked at previously?
Yeah. No, definitely. I think something like that has been mooted. It actually might even already be in effect. I know that one of the players who came to the Premiership last season was actually in that sort of situation where the club actually had to pay the Fijian Rugby Union in this instance a development fee for every year that had come through the academy before he was 24, I think. After the age of 24, there was no if they contracted him after the age of 24, they didn't have to pay anything. And so again, what happened in that situation was the club just, I think he was 22 and a half at the time, they just said, well, we won't contract him until he's 24, so they put it off signing him for a year and a half. So again, it takes clubs, governing bodies, organisation, to really buy into that sort of system. And actually, what we need as Pacific Islanders is people to start doing things because they're the right things to do, not because they have to do them, not because there's loopholes that they can get around, and getting players cheaply from the islands if they do this, and this. No, it's we need because they're not really sometimes within the values of the game. So I understand rugby's a business these days, and clubs and some of those tier one nations are looking out for them, for the in terms of their investors and the people that they represent. But problem being is that we don't really have a voice, or a strong enough voice as the Pacific Islands to make stands, where they're needed. But I think a key thing in that, Ian, what you suggested, is getting the right people around the conversation table. And I think, what we've seen since the game went professional is that actually, some of the decisions at that top table probably haven't been to our benefit, of actually, contributing to our detriment of our nations. And we need that to change. We need there to be a bit of a shift, I think, in terms of the way that the whole decision-making process, that whole World Rugby Council, which we address in the film, is being operated. Because the fact that you've got, unless you have influence on that at that top of the game, around that executive committee and the the voting table, it's very, very difficult to to instigate these kind of the policies in the game that would protect the not just Pacific Islands, but those other developing nations. I read the other day that I think it was Iran, Laos, and Burkina Faso or something have been admitted as full member unions to the World Rugby, and that was emblazoned all over the website and all over the news. This great news, but in actual fact, full member unions, they don't even have any votes. So it's all just, for me, there's a lot of smoke screens, a lot of false, what's the word, promotion from the governing body to the point where, that we make it look like this inclusive game. But actually there's a lot of work for us to do, collectively, for us to get to that position where we are aligned with the values that we preach to the world. So sorry, I've gone on for a massive rant there. Don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It does.
Lots of work to do.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. There probably is some sort of system in place, but it's from the sounds of things, clubs are bending the rules and trying to work a way around it. It's not implemented as well as it could. It's a good idea, but it's only as good as the implementation of the rules and making sure that the money is getting sent back and being used appropriately.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same with the eligibility laws. The changing of the 3 years qualification to 5 years. But what we're seeing, in a lot of cases, is just the way that is manifesting itself is that clubs, countries are just going and picking guys younger from the islands. So instead of going and signing them at 15 or 16, Rupeni Fautau's son now is being approached at 11 or 12. And so again, it's just in theory, a lot of these regulations, these decisions are being made probably with hopefully with best interests at heart, but in actual, the practicality of that is sometimes very different, and that's why we need the right people around that got people that are actually working on the ground. I think there's an issue, Ian, at the moment with rugby and world rugby in particular, that they don't embrace independent organisations, whether that be players' bodies or anyone really, consultants. There's a bit of a closed shop. In my opinion, that's holding us back. If we want to get the right answers, we need to open that process up and get people, and groups around the table that are, there for the right reasons, not just because they're on World Rugby's payroll or, under that, that funding from that governing body. So, yeah, again, lots of issues, mate. Lots of issues.
Well, Dan, it has been an absolute pleasure from the two of us to have you on, and best of luck with the documentary. And I hope loads more people see it.
There's big support for you guys from all the players here in Ireland.
Really appreciate that. Hopefully, we'll get Ireland over to the Pacific Islands sometime soon as well, eh?
Hopefully.
COVID.
House of Rugby Ireland, here on Joe, together with Guinness. Game changed.